Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is JY, and I am here with Josh, who's better known as Can't Get Right on the 7Sager forums. And we're here to do an AMA, well, mostly for Josh. Josh is here to do an AMA. I'm here to moderate. So, to get started, Josh, can I just have you introduce yourself briefly? I feel like a lot of people here already know you, but in case there's some new people here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like some key background information. Um, so I'm from Mississippi. Lived my whole life here. Went to my to undergrad at the University of Southern Mississippi. Majored in English. Graduated in 2008, and pretty much been working in managing and consulting with coffee shops ever since. Really not a whole lot. I guess I started studying for the LSAT in 2015. It's been a while, and I come a long way. Kind of started in about the high 140s range. Didn't take a true diagnostic, but the first PT after like 3 months of studying, I think it was a 152, and scored on this recent September scored a 176.
Yeah, so that's amazing. Congratulations, Josh.
Thank you.
I, I think, I know you're like we've talked in the past, so I know you're um, the road to that 176 was long and full of setbacks.
Yes, I think every road to a 176 for those of us who aren't just like just naturally somehow gifted with ability on this test is long and arduous.
Yeah, full of many setbacks. Um,
Yes.
in your case, though, I think there were three specific setbacks previous to
Yeah.
this score. Um,
Yes.
but so this was your fourth
Fourth.
take, right? Yeah. So tell us about that. What was the first three takes like?
Well, the first two were very similar. I was unprepared. I think my background in English kind of took me uh, further. It gave me an advantage. It's definitely a test of language as well as logic, and I think I kind of caught onto that a little more intuitively. So I studied, I guess, I always forget the exact timelines, but about I think 6 months. And I was working a lot, and I felt so my goal was always 170s or bust, and I think I had like one time score like way out of my range and hit like maybe a 171 or something. So the first time when I got a 163, and I was disappointed, but I took the test knowing I wasn't ready. Wasn't ready for my goal for what I wanted to do. So yeah, I decided I wanted to go to law school like just months prior to this. So then I did what I think many people do, and I signed up for the very next one, and kept doing more of the same of what I had been doing, and then actually went down a point to a 162. And then I was pretty upset. I mean, I think if I had gained a point or even stayed the same, it would have been different. But just going down a point on what you've already done after so much more effort is pretty discouraging. So I actually like just quit. I was like, well, I'm just not going to go to law school. I'm not gonna take the LSAT again. I'm done with this. This is stupid. And about 2 months later, I was like, I've got one shot left. So this was back when, right, you could only take it three times in the span of like 2 years, I think. So I was like, I can take this thing one more time, and it just doesn't sit right with me that I quit when I still have one shot left. So that was when all right, I gotta fundamentally change what I'm doing. I gotta do better. I've got to do something different. So that was when I signed up with 7Sager. I was like, okay, these books aren't working. I'm going to sign up with that website with the guy from the YouTube videos, um, and here I am. So after about another year, my first test was I guess it was October of that year, but the fall test of 2015. So I retook again in 2016, September 2016, and scored a 170, which I was very happy with. That was my goal score. I barely made it across that threshold. I felt like I was better than that, but at the same time, in hindsight, like I think that's probably a good representation of where I was. I did particularly poorly on logic games, which I found out since then should not have been surprising. Um, and so this time I fixed that, -0 on logic games. I'm happy to say, and and hit 176, which I think is was ultimately exactly my average PT score.
Yeah. So, okay, I have a lot of questions for you, Josh, and I'm sure people listening also have questions. So you guys can type that into the chat box, and I'll select from what I see there to toss over to Josh. But okay, so my first question for you is, we actually get, we as in 7Sage actually get a lot of students coming to us after they've done some other program. And
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what, one of the, so you're similar in that way, right? You came to us after having studied yourself, and
Hmm.
a lot of them, maybe these are just the vocal ones that we hear from, and maybe the majority is just silent, so I have no idea. But a lot of them do ask us questions like, oh, like, how can I skip around the core curriculum? Do I really have to view
Yeah,
everything? Like, and to hear you say that, after having taken the test twice already, and scoring,
yeah.
in your
Pretty
first two,
good. I mean,
that's like high 80th, low 90th percentile scores, right? So, which
yeah.
is, objectively really great scores. Um, so to hear you say that you just spent another year going through the curriculum,
Hmm.
like, I mean, I imagine it must have taken a lot of patience.
Yeah, there
How
were.
did you not think that, like, oh, I already know this stuff, like I can just like skip and whatever?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it's. I think something that is kind of. I don't want to say unique to my story, but the LSAT really became much more than a test that I had to take um, before I could go to law school. It really turned into a personal transformation. It was like people going and climb Mount Everest or something. That they don't do that because they have to before going on to something greater. There's no career in having climbed Mount Everest, but it's just the act of doing it is meaningful and transformative and powerful. And I feel the very much the same way about the LSAT. It serves as that catalyst in my life. Um, so with a lot of the earlier stuff when I came to 7Sage was kind of I guess coming to terms with myself. Yeah, I thought that I was uniquely special. I thought that I was inherently talented and intelligent and just all of these great things. And I mean I'm pretty smart. I mean I've been fairly successful as far as I've attempted to push myself. But I've never come up against something quite like the LSAT where I couldn't like really conquer it with the level of effort that I've kind of become accustomed to in life.
Hmm.
So I really wanted to kind of start over. I wanted to get rid of everything that I thought I knew about myself and about the LSAT, and kind of build up from nothing, because I didn't want to take anything for granted. I think like Descartes did something like that. It was his philosophy. I'm not really sure, but it was so I wanted to go back through the core curriculum because I thought it was important, not just to learn the LSAT, but also to learn myself better and to accept better and really and embrace my limitations. I'm not somebody that this came easily to. It was very hard for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to take anything for granted. I didn't want to make any assumptions about my own
Yeah.
ability. So I thought that was actually a very important part psychologically, as well as making sure that all of the gaps were filled in.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you suppose were the biggest changes? Like what do you suppose accounted for that jump from your second take of a 164 or 163 to your
Two,
62? Okay. To your third take of a 170. I mean that those 8 points are they're probably the hardest 8 points to make.
yeah,
Um,
those are incredibly different.
yeah, it's like
Different points from
different.
like jumping from like a 140 to like a 150,
Right,
something like that.
right,
There's a
right,
lot more space.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
so, I mean, a lot of
yeah,
it is I do think I improved my fundamentals. I wasn't, yeah, I understood, um, things like conditional logic, but I wasn't as comfortable as I needed to be. It's not just knowing how to do it; it's being, you really have to understand it and not have to really always work everything out. So I became more comfortable with things like that. One thing specifically I can say from the core curriculum that really I improved greatly on was necessary assumption. I thought that your explanation of just the nature of necessity and how that operates um, was really, really particularly excellent.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, yeah. Thank you. So that was a bit of it. Also, I mean, just the blind review method, just better study techniques. And then, I mean, I think there's only so far, just knowledge of the material can take you. I mean, I think a lot of people plateau in the, kind of middle of the 160s, and pretty much for the most part know what they need to know to go further. But it's really there's a strategic element of this test that is really, really important.
Right.
It's so I learned.
Oops, Josh. Josh, you still there? Can you guys hear him?
No.
He was just getting
No,
to.
he's gone.
He was getting to something important about strategy, but he's gone. We'll get him back.
Hanger.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Hey,
think
there
I'm
you are.
back.
Yeah. You left us hanging, Josh. We were at the edge of our seats waiting to
How
hear.
much of that did how much of that did y'all get?
So we got to there's a really important element about strategy, and then we were eagerly awaiting the conclusion of that thought.
Okay. Um, yeah. So strategy. So I found. I mean, I kept. I kept studying the same things. I kept studying, conditional reasoning and phenomenon hypothesis and all these same things, and I would just go back and study it, and I'd be like, yeah, like okay, I missed the questions that dealt with this, but I get it. Like I don't feel like this is helping, and so finally I realized that this whole other aspect of the test, which was strategy, and learning how to deal with that's how I kind of overcame like an LR, those final like 5 points. So I still to this day, when I finish a section of LR my first time through, I'm usually at about the -5 range. I'm right where I used to be. The difference now is that I've gotten to that point so efficiently that I've got 10 minutes left, and with that 10 minutes, I know exactly where to go back to for the most value. So things like that, and just learning logic games, and that was probably I felt really solid in RC and LR last year. And then logic games, the strategy of logic games is kind of where I think I fumbled the test, or that section last year, and I went -6 on logic games, which is, I mean, I was even then I was way better than -6, but I didn't have the strategy, and I really think particularly on the real things when you're dealing with anxiety and all that, the strategy was really important. That's what brought me through logical reasoning last year, after I started the test with LG and knew that I had kind of messed up and already missed my entire margin of error for my average PT.
Yeah. So this is to I guess maybe to flesh out some of what you were saying about the strategic element. Let's focus just on LR. I think what you had just described resonates with me in terms of uh, students who score in the mid to maybe even high 160s and have trouble breaking that 170 barrier. It's because it's not, like you said, it's not because they don't understand conditional logic. You said that now they can explain conditional logic to you. They can explain, scientific arguments that use phenomenon, hypothesis, framework, and so on and so forth. But it's kind of their time management, right? Like when they
Yeah,
decide to
absolutely.
do which questions and which fights they choose to fight, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I love
And
asking,
how long they choose to fight those
right, and
fights.
how long they choose to stay engaged with any particular fight, right? So I love
Yeah,
asking students, like, after like taking a prep test, like, were you trying to get every single question right? Like, were you actually trying
yeah,
to do
yeah.
all the questions? And everyone, invariably the answer is, well, yeah, of course. That's isn't that
Of
like,
course.
and the answer is actually no. It's You're not supposed to be like. Why are you trying to get every
Absolutely
single
not.
question right? It's not. You're not. Are you actually aiming for a 180? Right? Like if you're not prep testing at like a 177, you have to say no. I'm not aiming to get a 180. Right? You
Yeah.
have to be like, I'm aiming to get just a few points above what your average prep test is supposed to be, because that's how it works, right? You move up incrementally. And if you're
Hmm.
aiming just to get a few points above, you're supposed to be missing a bunch of questions. Like, you're supposed to be missing a bunch of questions,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's just your choice, like which questions to miss. That's the crucial difference, is whether you're letting the test choose for you, or
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
choosing for yourself, right? So talk more to us about your like sort of personal,
Yeah, yeah.
sort of, yeah. How did you work through that? How did you, like, yeah,
Yeah, it's something that I've developed over time, and I think as my thinking about it has become more sophisticated over time. So I mean, the first thing is I just kind of realized that that there's just so much progress you can make on a question with a reasonable amount of time. Like on an easy question, you can usually get to like 80% confidence really quickly. But that final 20%, that's going to take a lot longer. So you have to evaluate, what's the threshold of progress through a single question at which the returns you're getting begin to diminish beyond a point that time is no longer a good investment.
yeah,
So I mean, maybe you can get that 80% confidence in 45 seconds, but then from 45 seconds, to get to that 100%, it might take another minute, and that's not worth it. 80% is great. Yeah, that extra little bit just isn't that valuable. So I've come to think of questions in terms of probability. So one drill that I really like to do is I'll track my confidence for question by question, and I'll add up. Just before I move on, I'll write a fraction of a point. So if I'm 80% confident, I'll give myself 0.8 points for that question, and I'll go through the whole test like that. And it's interesting when I add all that up at the end, it matches my raw score, my actual results, very, very closely. So I'm not thinking about getting questions necessarily right or wrong. I'm trying to make as much progress as I can, with efficient use of time.
yeah,
So like the hardest three questions on the test, I still don't, I can't necessarily tell you that I'm confident that I'm going to get those right. Normally, what all I'm hoping to do, my goal on the three hardest questions on an LR section is I want to get my average confidence for those for those questions. I want to get my average confidence to 65%. So what that means is, if I'm evaluating my confidence right, and that is a skill that you can develop over time and become very, very good at self-assessment. That means I should get two of those right. I should miss one. That's great. That's a great place to be. And I can get to 65%. Like that I feel like is consistently attainable in a reasonable amount of time. If I were trying to get to 100% or even like 90% on a lot of these questions, I just couldn't do it. I mean, it would take me so long. I mean, I think
Yeah.
one thing that you said, Taylor, is like if you just look at the balance of the test, of the creation of the test versus the taking of the test. I mean, it's crazy how much is against us. There's
Yeah.
a whole team of people designing these questions, taking months to design these, and we've got maybe on like the hardest question we can spend like 2 minutes.
Right.
I
We're
mean,
like nervous. We're like not thinking
yeah,
straight, and we have, a minute and 15 seconds, right? Up against it's completely asymmetrical, right? So there's
yeah,
no way that you're going to penetrate the question with any level of depth that can match what the test writers are have on their side. So there's no point. It's not
yeah,
worth it, right? You want to make sure you're not so sucked into any particular fight where you lose sight of the opportunity cost of engaging in this fight. And that's what you're talking about, right? With 45 seconds
yeah,
to get to like 80% confidence on an easier question, that's good enough. If you spend an extra minute getting that additional 20% confidence, right? I mean, like
yeah.
that
It's
extra minute could have been spent getting you to 80% confidence on a different question, right? So
yeah,
it balances out better if you're more strategic. But
yeah.
it's a hard thing to do. It's something that um, well, I suppose if you don't think of it, or if you haven't heard anybody speak of it, it's hard to realize. And then so that's like one big hurdle. And then even after realizing it, it's still very difficult to put into practice.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, talk to us, Josh, about how you like once you understood this, how did you put it into practice?
I kind of I did a confidence drill, which was I just started like recording my takes,
Hmm.
and so I did this drill. I was just like so one thing I realized like my goal has to stop being miss as few questions as possible. That's not a very actionable goal.
Right.
So I began realize like okay, let's focus on one thing at a time, with obviously that being ultimately the result we hope for. So the goal of the confidence drill is not to miss as few questions as possible. So I had to kind of understand that, just embrace that, just take a deep breath and be okay with it, and work towards a different goal. And that goal is to go like almost at like a reckless pace, and and just kind of move on. Like whenever you cross that threshold of getting to 80% really quickly and really efficiently, and everything beyond that being significantly diminished returns, recognizing that threshold and moving on immediately. With the ones that you're just not going to make much progress on.
Like in
Uh,
practice, what does that look like?
yeah, yeah.
In practice, does that mean
It's
sometimes you don't read all the answers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you if you I mean if you for me it's about 80%. When I get to 80%, like I'm done. Sometimes I get to 80% because I've read A and it's like, oh, that's definitely it.
Mhm.
In that case, you circle it, you move to the next
It's
question.
so cookie cutter that like A just snaps right into place. And
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's the other thing I realize is like, this also acts as a stress test, which as you get better and better, you can make up for your own misunderstandings and your own gaps in knowledge. So the other thing I liked about that is when I did make a mistake, normally it revealed something that would not have been revealed otherwise. It's like, oh, I fell for a trap here. Uh, which is something, and I'd go back as if I had kept reading, I wouldn't have done that. So how do I recognize this next time? I didn't
mhm.
even know I needed to be looking for that.
Yeah,
So a lot of great information from that drill. Um, but yeah, it can mean a lot of different things. Question from question. I mean, a lot of times it might mean okay, I could spend 2 minutes on this and not make much progress. Is write
right.
this one off. It's important to be able to pick your losers. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I like that. It is very much overlooked how important it is to pick your losers. Right.
yeah,
So a lot of people hearing, I don't know if they caught that, but you said that you had taped yourself doing the actual
yeah,
sessions
yeah.
and prep tests. Um, Now, so what does that look like in practice? Like, what do you do with the tape when you're done with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that question, and it's I mean, I've been filming my test for like a year and a half now. So it's like, what do you do with it? What do you not do with it? I mean, you just get so much data. I mean, I think that's ultimately you get data, empirical data. So I mean, the first thing I do is I just I watch it through with a stopwatch and just track my times. That's the main thing. Is if you're working on time management, you've got to know what your times are. It's not something you can evaluate as you go, or finish up and think back on and say, this one may have taken a little too long.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, the first time I watched footage back, I mean, it was like watching a bad movie where like a horror movie where everybody just being like completely stupid and you're just like yelling at the TV. I was just like, I was literally yelling at myself. I was vocalizing my dissatisfaction with what I was seeing. And yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see. I mean, the questions that I really lost the most time on, those were the questions I was going to miss anyway. And I mean, it's just like after seeing that, like things really began to start clearing. I was still kind of stuck in that like mid 160s range. I couldn't really push into the 170s, even though I felt like I knew everything. But when I watched that video, that first time, and I think that video's floating around 7Sage somewhere.
Not that one.
Not that one. Okay.
Yeah, it was the one after. It was the one after you had already started to implement some of the started to become more conscientious about timing and starting to like sort of bump your confidence up.
Right.
So that you would move faster and more recklessly through some of the questions.
Yeah.
Once that transition happened, I think that was the footage that we had put up.
Okay.
I'm not going to say which prep test because I can't remember. And also,
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't remember. I guess that's the reason. But it's definitely out there, and I overlaid commentary on it. So at some point in your studies, you guys in the audience, you'll almost certainly come across this prep test, and when you're reviewing it, you'll probably come. I'll just say Josh has beautiful hands with very very long fingers.
Very long fingers, very
Anyway, so that's yeah, so it is like a lot of work, and I think one of the most common responses from students is it really necessary? Do I really have to? Because think about it, right? You're doing the setup like with your cell phone holder, and then you place masking tape on your table to demarcate where the frame it begins and where the frame ends, and then like transferring the footage. These are giant files. Like if you're recording on like 1080p, we're talking about file sizes like 3 gigabytes per section. Yep. Or if you're recording at 4K, it's over 10 gigabytes per section, and you're transferring onto your computer, and then you're watching it, and then you have to watch the whole thing and start and pause to like record your times for each question. It's just a boatload of work,
Yeah.
So one of the most common concerns is a really helpful, and I mean, I don't know. For me, the answer is obviously yes.
I think anybody aiming, I mean, certainly for the 170s, I think it's. I mean, there's a reason. Like, I like baseball players. I mean, professionals at everything. I mean, if you're a professional baseball player, you've got a guy in batting practice recording your swing, and then you sit down with your baseball coach, and you watch it in slow motion, backwards and forwards, and you nitpick, everything. I mean, if you, people at the highest levels of everything record themselves. I mean, musicians record their practices and things. I mean, it's just it provides an objective experience for something that is inherently subjective,
right?
And the subjective is not very useful.
It's unreliable, like you ask yourself, you're honest with yourself. You don't really. The answer is, well, what was I thinking? For most of those questions, the answer is I just don't remember. Right? You just
who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Right? So it's either you have this empirical evidence, or you're just relying on your subjective memory. Um, yeah, so that's very good. We have a question here from Bunny. Bunny, can you unmute yourself?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Bunny.
Yeah. Hey. Oh, sorry, I had a couple questions. So I was up here at the top, the making your actual PT closer to your blind review. I'm quite a ways apart.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that just going through the strategies and
yeah, I think for me that was all strategy. The increasing your blinder view is increasing your knowledge and fundamentals, and closing the gap is all strategy. Yeah, and there's room to work in tandem on that, but for me it was 95% strategy.
okay. And then my other question was, so like Josh take 3 versus Josh take 4 on the test. Did
Yes.
you have a ton of fresh PTs, and did you like start over and redo? Like I'm kind of stuck where, I maybe have 5 or 6 fresh PTs I've never looked at, but other than that, I've got stacks and stacks of things I've been through. So where do I even start?
Yeah, yeah.
To
So
try to, I need a new strategy, period. Yeah.
so for my fourth take, I had 2, which
Okay.
is which was a very scary number. And I
Yeah.
was when because they changed the rules so that I could take it. Although I suppose maybe I'd gone over the 2 years. I'm not actually sure.
Wait, Josh,
Um,
can we focus on between your take two and your take three? Because I think even there
oh
you
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
that
have
too.
too many. And then we can talk about how you improved from take three to take four, and then you can
okay,
address the fact that you only had like two.
yeah. So I mean, I think I say in the write up for this that like I make pretty much every like all of the if you go and watch the on in the curriculum like the biggest LSAT mistakes. I think I've done all of them in spectacular form. So between my first 2 takes, when I really was nowhere right, I just took practice test after practice after practice. I mean, probably 2 or 3 a week. Um, so I had burned through the bulk of things already anyway. I mean, I think. Um, I can't remember exactly how many fresh tests I had left for, when I started with 7Sage, but it wasn't as many as I would have liked. Luckily, actually, that was during, so I guess it's still, there were no PDFs and there was no other way. You couldn't get electronic LSATs, and the 40s were out of print. Like I was literally seeing the 40 series sell for like $1,000 for the set.
Yeah.
A lot of the older tests, kind of same thing. The ones that were out of print. So luckily, I was unable to take those early on. So I had all of those tests. I had kind of sporadic tests throughout the 70s. So I didn't have much. So I really had to learn how to use retakes, which are inherently inflated. Uh, but luckily, I mean it's a good diagnostic, but I left a lot of value in those practice tests. I didn't blind review. I kind of just took them and then like immediately turned around, scored them, graded them, went to the wrong answers, and looked at them and said, "Oh, okay, I see what I did." I when I started blind reviewing and writing out all of my explanations, I found that whenever I told myself like, "Oh, I see what I did," it was total bullshit. I didn't see what I did because when I went to write it down, I couldn't do it. So I had to think, in much greater depth. Um, so yeah, I had to learn how to use retakes, and there was still a lot of value there. I mean, I had completely wasted them the first time, so those scores were inflated, but I was still able to learn a lot from them. And then the fresh tests I used very very sparsely. I had to really place a premium on taking those. I had to take those for a reason. I mean, that is I think one thing that I think is just really consequential is if you have no expectation that you've made any improvement since your last practice test, then what are you doing taking a practice test? What are you hoping is better?
You're hoping for
There's
a miracle.
yeah, that's the only way you can improve. That's the only way. Uh, so I had to learn how to study and how to drill and how to do exercises and do other things other than just take tons of PTs. So I would identified problems, reasons that I had missed questions and lost points on one PT. And then I would analyze the test. I would look at it critically and identify specific things that had cost me points. And then I would study them. I would try to, eliminate those things as weaknesses. When I felt like I had done that, that's when I could take another practice test. And whenever I kind of, if it's particularly if you don't have a lot of practice tests left, I would want to kind of prove that to myself through a repeat. That like, okay, I seems like I've really made significant progress on these things. Now I can take a fresh test. So that was kind of how I kind of developed that like study strategy kind of throughout my time at 7Sage, and just kind of pieced it together and I figured out not just to study for the LSAT, but how to study, and things besides just like brute force exposure to new material. Because that's really it becomes a small part of it.
Awesome. Hey, just one thing. I know there's a lot of people. When you were talking about explanations, and right after you went back and then we're reviewing, are you like writing a couple sentences and you're like, this is what I was thinking, even on something maybe you got right, and then when you timed it, you realize, man, I spent 2 minutes on that. I should have gotten that in 30 seconds. Like it's that kind of thing going through. What was I thinking?
Well, like my blind review was very extensive. I would for harder questions, I might fill up a page and a half of notebook paper. So that was really extensive. For timing, that was kind of a different analysis. You just kind of look at your time and compare it to the video, and I always wanted to kind of find that threshold of diminishing returns and identify the moment where I should have moved on. That was kind of how I would look at that.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question, Bunny. Josh, so I think to sum up here, you're moving from 162 on your second take to a 170 on your third take. I think the major causal components there. Number one, of course, you found 7Sage. You saw the light.
Yes, absolutely.
And number two was definitely focusing on strategy, like time management. Recording yourself, figuring out how much time you're supposed to spend, which questions you're supposed to give up on, etc. So that got you up to 170. Am I missing? Is there something else like a major component? Because next I want to ask you about how you move then from 170 to a 176.
Yeah.
So just so you guys keep like it's already been like close to 2 years, right? For Josh, maybe I'm exaggerating, like a year and a half to get to that 170.
Yeah, about a year and a half, I think.
Yeah, to get to that 170, and then from the 170 to a 176 was another year, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the difficulty of those points. I think that's probably about representative.
Yeah. Each additional point is harder to get than the previous one. Like as you're moving up the ladder, like the next point is harder to get than the previous one.
Yeah, way harder. But just because there's nothing left, but the curve breakers that I don't always expect to get right. I mean, you've got to get the questions right that that they're really designing for the bulk of the field to miss.
Right.
So 170 to 176 is that was tough. I mean, one big component of it was definitely teaching. I mean, I think to explain something and to guide other people to understanding, because I don't like to explain what I teach, but to ask the right questions. That's a lot of it is just knowing the correct questions that are being posed in the different situations. And so that I think was a really big component of it.
Because after getting a 170, you were already really active in the forums, but I think you really took it up and started doing office hours, started doing like LR reviews and blind review workshops, and so what is it about, like, what is it about teaching? I mean, I say this, I try to say this, like, you always want to try to teach, because you, no matter where you are, you can always teach down, right? Like, you understand
Yeah, yeah.
things that you might not understand everything, but you understand things that other people don't. So those are that's like your teaching space, you know.
Hmm.
But what about it? Because you know, like you said, you had two prep. You didn't even have two prep tests at that point, like, right? Because you had to wait a year out for them to
Yeah, I had to
release two
wait.
new
Yeah,
prep
I had to
tests for you to have those two
wait.
prep tests. So what, like, yeah, how did you, what were you teaching? How did you, um, I don't know, how do you still maintain like sort of battle readiness, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not as far as battle readiness, like being in shape. I'm not sure that you do. I mean, when I decided to take another shot, this September, I probably hadn't taken a timed section. I did it. I kept like kind of after the LSAT last year, like I didn't know what to do with myself, so I just kind of like, took some PTs like after the fact and jumped on some blind review calls. But yeah, I mean, it had been almost, I mean, at least 6 months, and yeah, it was a little rusty. But I think that the theoretical understanding was what was better than ever. So then I had to, yeah, I had to, kind of get back into shape. I mean, yeah, I had to, do some drills and kind of, yeah, I think it comes back faster the second time, but it definitely, I mean, it was not like a, bicycle. It had to, had to, sharpen back up. But I think, I don't know, I think I kind of almost like that because now this time going through it, I was doing with, I wasn't having to figure anything out as I went. Like I had already like fully solidified like my understanding of how this works and how you achieve these specific goals. So I kind of I felt like I really knew what I was doing from and a part of that is teaching other people to do it. Yeah, I kind of yeah I know the struggle. I know the pitfalls and the things that so I think I put that all together and I had to use repeats for it. I mean I couldn't you never use a especially if you only have two left. You can't use that material for getting into shape and just practicing. So it was weird to kind of take another test. Like I think the first thing I did was I just kind of took a section of LR, which is I think long been my strongest section, and I did fine on it, but I finished with like 2 minutes left, which I'm accustomed to finishing with 10 minutes left. So it was definitely like I had to review the footage, break it down, see my times, and find out what I had done, and then I just responded to it. Yeah, it was I didn't have to prove to myself that oh, okay, if I just do it, I will have time to come back to it at the end. I already knew that, so I think I was able to do it because especially like going back to the confidence drills, they're scary. They take a little courage, and I didn't need that because I had already been through it, and I knew it was going to be fine.
yeah. Okay. So it sounds like one component was teaching a lot of people for very many sessions, kind of boosted your theoretical understanding.
Yeah, yeah,
But then that doesn't necessarily translate into practice because it's just different when you have to think about a question under immense time pressure, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
to sort of try to stay in shape, you did take retakes, but like you knew that that's not a good approximation. I mean, it's the best approximation you have, but it's still not a good approximation
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the real thing. Um, okay, but then you just had to make do with your two fresh PTs that you could. How did you do on those two fresh PTs?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not even positive. I think one of them I hit like a high mid 170s, and I think the other one I got like a 172 maybe.
Hmm.
Um,
And these are
so
like, are they 80 and 81?
yeah, yeah, that was all I had is the things that were released, since I had
Right,
tested last year.
right. Yeah.
Um, so I think the first one was a little rough. I mean, there's, definitely, I guess, I don't know. There's something about like, okay, this is, my one of two PTs. Like this is, I'm really, burning a very, very significant test here, but I'm, I've kind of gotten back in shape. I'm ready. So I think I was LSAT ready, but I wasn't fully psychologically ready. And then I think just by the time I took the second one and I did better, I just didn't care anymore. Which was another component on test day that was really, really useful. I mean, I was already in at the school I wanted to go to, and so I didn't really have to. I mean, if I bombed it, it was going to be fine.
Yeah, lowering the stakes really helps a lot.
Yeah,
It's like psychologically helps a
absolutely.
lot. Yeah. So for I guess most people are not in your situation. So one thing you guys can do and to kind of psychologically help yourselves is to sign up for more than one test and to prepare to take the test more than once. I know it's not. This is like bitter medicine. Nobody really wants to, but you know, you're going like December is the next upcoming test, right? In a few short weeks, you're going to be that version of yourself who is presently in the future, right? Like future Josh, you know,
Yeah.
that person is going to be very grateful to this current version of you if this current version of you signed up for the February one as well, because then that person not just sign up like nominally sign up, but like sign up and with a sincere intention to prepare and take it in February, because then that December version of you is going to be shouldering only half the burden, right? Knowing that you're still in the middle of prepping. So like, how could it go? Either it goes really well, in which case, great, right? You're done. Or if it doesn't go so well, okay, that's just going according to plan. You're going to take it in February anyway. So psychologically, especially because LSAT got rid of that 3 takes in 2 years rule, I think psychologically it changes. Okay, so we have a question here from Matt.
Okay. My question was, I read in the discussion that Josh, you got a -0 on RC. Where did you start, and what helped you the most with your improvement there? And thank you for this for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. So I think I started with RC. Like I said, I was an English major, so I feel like it was naturally my strongest section. So I think I started around like -5, and -5 was far and away my best section when I started, and it remained. I mean, until I really figured strategy out. I mean, I was still at finishing -5 in LR. However much I felt like I had really kind of mastered the fundamentals. So I think it was. I got a little better just through seeing more and more and kind of figuring out some of the tricks. So it was probably like -4 when LR and LG really started to click, and then all of a sudden I kind of realized that having stayed exactly the same in reading comprehension, it had actually through virtue of the other sections getting so much better, RC had become my weakest section. So yeah, I was at this point like a year into my studies, I had never really formally studied reading comprehension, and now I have to figure out, how to approach this. And it definitely initially when I started doing this, my score got way worse. I think that's pretty common actually when you begin studying something for the first time. You're changing the way you think about it. It's very uncomfortable and unnatural at first. So it got worse, which was a little scary, but then it started coming together. And there were several components to that. One was I just like with the other sections, I wanted to have a very clearly defined strategy. So I kind of determined like, okay, if my time distribution between the passage and the questions, what do I want that to look like? I mean, I know some people can read the passage in like 2 minutes and then go into the questions and knock those out and be able to look back and confirm and all that. So I like tried that out a couple times. I can read the passage in 2 minutes, but that didn't really work for me. I kicked a few things around, and ultimately for me, I discovered that kind of my optimal balance was kind of a 3.5 to 4 minute mark in the passage. And then when I get into the questions, that dictates my strategy. And I have to kind of just rely on my memory and and trust my understanding, and just kind of answer the question. I can't agonize over questions. I kind of just gotta pick the thing that seems the strongest and move on. I maybe one question per passage. I can look back to the passage and really try to figure things out. But without a line sight, I for the most part don't allow myself to go back. That's what works for me. I think I don't know. I think RC has kind of. I can see how if you're a faster reader, maybe something that allows for a little more might be better for other people. But for me, I figured out that strategy, and then a lot of it is just the subtlety of the answer choices. You kind of just got to learn kind of what they're up to with the specific wording, because I do find the answer choices in RC to be very, very difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Matt, what is your specific issue? I presume you have some issues with RC, which is what's prompting your question. If that's true, can you speak to what your specific issues are with RC?
Well, I've kind of done. I've kind of been all over the place with RC as well. Well, though I've never. It's kind of just always remained like by far my weakest. I've tried lots of different strategies, and from diagramming to the memory method, and just I guess I still don't have a good hand on what I can do to get better, but.
What are we talking about here? Like, are you struggling to finish 3 passages?
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean,
so one of them you just straight up don't even get to look at.
Right.
Okay. So I'm guessing, like, if we're talking about raw score for RC, you're looking at like
15,
minus 10, so like about 15, 17 points.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and you're saying that's with like straight up not even looking at one of the 4 passages.
Yeah. The most recent one I got was minus 10, but yeah, the ones before that were like minus 15, I think.
Okay, Josh, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's so. I mean, one thing about this, like I said, like if you're trying out lots of strategies, I mean, I every time I try out a new strategy, anything, I tend to do worse first, and particularly in RC, I think it takes for me anyway, it took a long time to actually get my strategy to where I could execute it naturally. So it may be that you move on to something else but before you've had a chance. And I guess the other thing is just looking at the time. I mean, so I know I've seen a lot of people suggest in that situation to focus on the 3 and make sure that you do as well as you can there. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really like that. I mean, I think you get more from being more aggressive and getting to attempt the 4th passage. I mean, I think getting 4 passages in. I mean, even if you're having to move quickly through the questions, and then kind of like I do, just have to roll with something that you think is the best. I think you get more returns on that, but I suppose you could figure that out empirically.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think it's a suboptimal strategy to attempt to do only 3. First of all, you have to make sure, like if you're doing that, you have to make sure you're picking the right 3 passage. What if you omit the easiest passage with the highest number of easiest questions? And then to not do that, you need to know which passage is the easiest one, which one is the one that contains the highest number of easiest questions. So I don't know how you can. I'm not sure. You have I think like noisy signals for that, so it's not a reliable method to figure that out. But conversely, if you try to do all 4 passages, sure, like one of them is going to be the hardest passage. As soon as you assume some variation in difficulty, then by definition, one of them is going to be the hardest, right? But it doesn't mean every single question associated with that passage is a 5-star question. That's definitely not what it means. There are going to be easy questions, even in the hardest passage set. So I think it's kind of similar to, the conversation we had about LR earlier, where Josh talked about how you have to know yourself. You have to know which questions are out of your league for now, right? As the clock is ticking, and you just need to move on from that, right? So a lot of RC is also about time management, right? You want to, I would say, Matt, you want to take it as a goal to get through all 27 questions, but you don't want to seriously engage with each and every question, right? So you want to manage your time where you're actually skipping over the ones that are harder. I mean, just as a recent example, I was looking at footage. This person spent 5 minutes on the passage for passage 1, and then another 4.5 minutes on the questions, 6 questions associated with passage 1. So we're talking about 9.5 minutes for just the first passage set. And she got everything right. But that's actually a fail, right? That's a fail because you spent too much time. And then when she got to the last passage with 7 questions, and it happened to be the hardest passage, with 7 questions, she had about 5.5 minutes left to do that. So she ended up missing a bunch of questions there. And like, if you want to trace the cause, I would trace it to how much time you spent, how underconfident you were in the first passage, right? So it's not clear. Just if you don't, again, this is kind of what having footage is able to reveal to you. Because if you just look at the score reports, like, oh, you got everything right in the first passage, you missed this question in the second passage, and then missed like 6 questions in the fourth passage. Uh-oh, something really bad happened in the fourth passage. We got to just really... But actually, the cause traces back to the first passage. So time management is incredibly important. A lot of the harder passages, you don't actually have to understand everything, right? Like, in the curriculum, I call it a low resolution understanding. Just like understanding the structure gets you 70% of the way there. And that's a huge improvement already for most people.
Yeah, I just kind of as an example, I mean, I was actually doing a passage the other day, which was from a very early PT. I think it's considered like kind of the first like notoriously hard science passage. And there was a lot of detail I did not understand. And but it was okay. I took away kind of one central thing. I don't want to spoil the passage because I think it's a really useful one. But I knew that one thing like controlled the phenomenon that was being discussed. And that's really, I mean, I couldn't have told you the mechanisms or anything beyond that. Like I knew it's like, okay, this one thing is the cause. And then there's all this effect, which I don't fully understand. And I just kind of went forward with that. And I was able to, rather than, struggle through understanding everything, I was actually able to get through all the questions. There was one I had to look back, and I think I ended up missing it anyway. But I went -1 for that passage with very, very limited understanding.
Yeah, that's pretty common. I found.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I'll be reading the passage and be like, oh my god, this is totally over my head, right? I really don't know what's going on. Maybe some very shallow, simplistic understanding. But then when you turn to the questions, it turns out that if you have the right kind of structural, low resolution understanding of the passage, you can get through most of the maybe like you said, there's like one question that actually requires a deep understanding. You have to not only understand the text, but also read in between the lines, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just tell myself I'm just going to give up on that question. Like, or at the very least, I'm going to save it for the very, very end, right? To make sure that I don't have anything else to work on. My choice is either to sit here and do nothing, right, or to work on this question.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what I did on this past September test. Is I think I was able to go back and change and correct I think I corrected like 3 answers.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and then if I had missed those, it wouldn't have been catastrophic. I'm certainly glad that I didn't spend a lot of time getting them right, and then felt really rushed and panicked on the final passage. That wouldn't have that wouldn't have yielded a gain.
Yeah. Okay, so Hamesh, is your mic working? Or sorry, not Hamesh, Hamasa. Sorry, I'm totally mangling your name. I'm just going to read your question. uh, you
Hello?
said, hi,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, it was being slow. So my question, a while ago before this last question, you said to plan to sit in for example, for December, knowing that you're going to retake it. But I'm really confused about the advice about retakes. And I was wondering if you could clarify how law schools view the retakes.
Okay, yeah. So it's I mean that's definitely out there. Like I've heard this, like, law schools don't want to see 3 takes, certainly not 4 takes. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a 176 on your 4th take is way better than a 163 on 1 take. Yeah, it's a numbers game. It's admissions is all about numbers, and all they report to establish their rankings is your top score. It probably does look a little better if you get it on the first one, but the value of that is so minimal compared to a better score that it's just not it's not a big enough factor to really play into it at all. I mean, you don't want to take it. I mean, like I did the first 2 times I took it, I was completely unprepared. You don't want to do that. But last year on my September test last year, I was certainly I was ready. I was certainly I think well beyond striking distance, so it was appropriate to take it then. But the second, if I had signed up, if I at that time, if I could have signed up for the December test past that, yeah, it would have relieved some of the pressure. Because like, oh, okay, like, the real test is in December. So this one, it isn't so consequential. I think that was the primary point that JY was.
Yeah, so we didn't even talk, like we just kind of glossed over that point. When Josh took it for the 3rd time, this was before the LSAT changed their rules. So that that was his last time that he back then that he got to take it. Like this was it, right? The 3rd take was this time.
That was final take ever.
Because it was a 163, 162, and then whatever he gets on this take, and that's it, he's done. So that was very stressful psychologically.
Yeah, that was an intense psychological state.
Right. Just imagine how, like, I think that's a very good case in point. Just imagine how much better it would have been. You can easily imagine, put yourself in that situation and just be like, okay, I get to sign up for the administration after this one as well. Like immediately, it's way less stressful, right?
Oh man, that would have been so nice last year.
Yeah, but you still did pretty good. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with what Josh just said. It's true, but it's not that. It's just like not that important, It's the same with like applying early. Yeah, it's true. All else held equal, it's better to apply early than later. But usually people make that decision applying early. It's precisely because not everything's going to be held equal. You're waiting on that better recommendation. You're trying to churn out that like 12th draft of your personal statement. That takes time. You're studying for the LSAT again so that you can get a better score, and that takes time, right? So all of those other factors will delay your application, but those other factors are more important, right? Same thing here. Like, yeah, all else held equal, sure, one score, like a single 176, I suppose, is better than like 4 takes, the 4th one being a 176, right?
Yeah, sure.
I think it makes a lot more sense now that you clarified, because I think I took it as like, okay, you're not ready, but you're still going to sit in for December knowing you'll take it again. But it seems like what you're saying is when you're ready, sign up for 2 tests knowing that you have a chance to retake it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Sure. Shantae, is your mic working?
Yeah, so my question was, when I'm finished with the core curriculum, like transitioning directly from core curriculum, what suggestion do you guys have for like amping up your stamina for full PTs? Because I just see going straight from core curriculum to full PTs for me is a bit of a stretch. So like, is there any suggestions on, or do you just plow ahead and go into that, or like what are some suggestions? And then I also had another question about how long does it typically take to finish the LG bundles?
Yes, I have a webinar on transitioning from the core curriculum into practice testing, so I could answer that in great depth. Kind of a once over is, as far as like preparing for like stamina, you don't want to just take tons of practice tests. You want to, like I was saying about you kind of earlier, it's after you take a practice test, you want to get as much information out of it as you can, and then the real work kind of becomes all of the stuff that you should be doing between practice tests. So I mean, I think starting out, I mean, maybe like you shouldn't be taking that many practice tests. The goal is to identify what went wrong for each test, and then to eliminate the misunderstandings that led to those errors.
I guess what I was trying to find out is, like, when you finished a core curriculum, just from doing a regular assignment role or drills or something, how do you transition just going straight to the 4-hour sit down and just doing them from there?
Oh, okay. So the actual stamina required for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you suggest transitioning from the actual core curriculum to the actual full test?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a part of it is, just practice. I mean, at a certain point, I mean, that there is a certain level of stamina required. You've got to be sharp. So, I mean, I think for me, the important thing was to, make sure I got enough sleep. Make sure that, I got out of bed in the morning at a, good early hour, had my coffee, had a good breakfast. It really, for me, that became this whole lifestyle of good, healthy living and just general well-being. I actually coordinated my daily schedule to test day. So I knew, like, on test day, like, okay, I want to wake up at 5:30 because I want to go for a run. I want to have a good breakfast. I want to, sit and relax and drink my coffee, leisurely and just kind of breathe. All these things that I decided I wanted to do. Like, I kind of designed what I wanted that to look like, and I lived test day every day. And that kind of got me into that rhythm, and to where I was sitting down at 8:30 to 9 o'clock, and I made sure that at that time I'm going to be at my like peak mental capacity. I'm going to be sharp. I'm going to be awake and focused. So that was kind of a big part of how I dealt with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you kind of just jump in and do it. The first time that you do it is going to suck.
Yeah.
But then the next time will suck a little less, and that's how you do it.
Yeah, I know 36 has one of my, which is I think the first out of the curriculum, the first recommended PT, has one of my least favorite games of all time. So for me, it really sucked. I think that was in the series that I actually had fresh, so I took that right out of the curriculum. A lot of fun.
And while we're on the subject of stamina, at some point, you're gonna have to like take certain PTs and break them up and use their sections as inserts to other PTs, so that you end up taking 5-section PTs, because that's what you actually get on the test, right? So it's totally up to you. Like, you can just decide PT 40, you're going to be sacrificed. I'm going to split you up into 4 pieces. And then each piece will get inserted into, I don't know, whichever 4 other PTs you decide.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and that's great, because every 4 tests that you take, you actually get a fifth. You get a 5th test out of it. And that's a good way to also to care about the experimental, because on the real thing, I don't care what anybody says. You have no idea what the experimental is. People say all the time, it's like, oh, I could tell that was the experimental because it was, like too easy or something. Like, I have no idea. I can't spot it, and don't think it's.
You shouldn't be thinking about that either.
Sure that you're caring about the experimental.
And so far, the LG bundle, did you do those, or if you did, how long did it take you to complete that, or did you do it and synchrony with your PTs?
I did a lot of right out of the curriculum, and then I kind of quit for a while. So I kind of half-assed logic games the first time through, and I was continually a lot of times I would just stumble into a good section, and I would use that to justify, like, okay, I'm fine. So and then at a certain point I had to accept, like, okay, I've got to deal with this. This can't be a possibility. When I would drop a section, and a lot of times a whole test, but because of the logic game section. So I stopped practice testing. I identified something that I needed to improve before it was useful to take another practice test. And I guess I spent maybe like 3 weeks, just focusing on blind reviewing pretty exclusively. And after that, I was pretty good. I think. So I mentioned, like, logic games, I think, was the difference, or a big part of the difference between last year and this year. So I think one thing that I fell into with foolproofing is there were pitfalls to that I didn't realize. Just as I became comfortable with the game that I was foolproofing, that I had done once, the second time through, I like each subsequent time through, I got a little sloppier each time I did a game, because the procedural shortcuts and mistakes and errors kind of self-corrected. So I think that's what went wrong last year. If looking back at that section, I saw, like, okay, I didn't like have a catastrophic error that cost me 6 points. I just had a lot of little ones. So I added, this past time for the 176, I added on top of foolproofing. I've been calling it procedural foolproofing. I actually made a flow chart of exactly how I take logic games. And I said, okay, step one, what's the first thing I do? Well, I read the setup. So I would go from the flow chart, read the setup. When I was done with that, I would go, okay, what's the second thing? And I would just go step by step by step, just meticulously, tediously through it until, like, okay, I now approach logic games with the exact same procedure every time. I've done this so many times that it's become so ingrained. Like, I don't think I could do a logic game with a different procedure. So eliminating those minor procedural errors that I think my sloppy foolproofing had allowed for and had covered up, I think was kind of the final piece of the puzzle for me for logic games. And as far as how long did it take, probably about maybe 4 weeks the first time, 3 weeks the second time, and 2 or 3 weeks previous to this last September test.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Josh, we're getting requests to have you share that flow chart of yours.
Yeah, I could share. I've got a very rough digital version, so maybe I can post a link to that and maybe the thread for this after we're done.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to share.
Okay, so Isha?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, how are you?
Hi, doing well. Thank you for doing this AMA, both of you. So I actually had some questions so the biggest thing I'm struggling with right now is kind of what you talked about during this whole session, that huge gap between PT and BR. And kind of looking back on where I feel like I mess up, I tend to get stuck when debating between two answer choices, kind of both in LR and RC, where I feel like, oh, I've invested so much time into this and I'm sure that it's one of these two, but it's like maybe a detail that's making me question one or the other. And in RC especially, it's like you were saying, going back to the passage really takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, what strategy did you use and how do you, I guess, since you've invested so much time and maybe you've gotten to that point where you're like, these three are definitely wrong and these two are right, how do you pick? Yeah,
I think 50-50 strategy is really important, especially on a lot of the harder questions. That's kind of how what it comes down to. So if I can't do it quickly, if I get to the end of my answer choices, I've got 2 left. I'll go back, reconsider, maybe glance up at the at the stimulus again. I probably won't glance back to the passage unless I know exactly where to go and I'm like 100% confident. But I'll move on pretty quickly. What I've noticed is normally the reason I can't differentiate between two answer choices is because I'm missing something. I missed a key detail. I misread something slightly. If I stick with it, I keep making the same error over and over. I keep reading it the same way. It doesn't clarify. It doesn't come out. So a very important part of that for me is that I skip it. I actually have a very specific notation as I'm going through. I've got, I don't just circle things for blind review. I circle things for, okay, this is a priority to come back to. I double circle things for, okay, you're probably just going to miss this one, and it's okay. So I come back to those. That's the first thing I do when I finish the section is I go back to those 50-50 situations, because a lot of the times when I come back to it, whatever I was missing jumps out at me. Whatever I was misreading, with a fresh start, it corrects. So hopefully, I imagine a lot of times in blind review, when you get to those, it probably like doesn't take you forever to do those. Like a lot of times you probably are able to get those pretty quickly, pretty confidently. So that's a lot of times I just need a fresh start. And when I come back to it, I benefit from the work that I've already done. I normally don't need to re-eliminate the three that I've already gotten rid of. Sometimes I end up eliminating the remaining two, and that's a whole different thing. I think getting a little space is really important for me in those situations, and that's I think my primary way to deal with that is I come back to it, and the fresh start, the blank slate, I'm able to pick up on whatever I was missing.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. That really helps.
Okay, yeah. You're welcome, man. I hope that we'll improve on that, because I think I know for me, I have a ton of those, and I tend to do pretty well of them with that strategy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I've taken around 8 PTs since I finished the core curriculum at the beginning of September, and it was just timing was just such a big issue, and I just couldn't figure out because I was trying to skip, and I was doing some of the strategies that I saw in the video that you guys made for post-core curriculum, and I just felt like it was this kind of question where I feel like I've invested so much that I really struggled to address the timing issue there. So this really kind of helps.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing, because you feel like you can't skip until you're going to have the time to come back to it, but you have to create the time by skipping in order for it to happen. So it's kind of it can kind of be like a leap of faith the first time. So just go through it, and like we said with objectives of the exercise, do a section where the objective is not to score as best you can. Do an exercise where the objective is to bank as much time as you can, and judge your success based on how much time you have at the end, and work on it from that angle.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dee asked the question, what would you do what would you do over if you had the chance? Like, what would you do different, right, if you had the chance?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, well, I'm not sure. So I was going to say I would just do it right from the start.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's, I think it's probably a good answer, but I mean, like I said, this test was much more to me than just something that I've got to do before I can go to law school. Personal transformation, and so I don't know that I can sincerely say that, because I had to grow as a person, and I think ultimately that's means more to me than the opportunities that this is going to create. As big as that is, I really feel like I transformed and earned it, and but became a better version of myself. So I think a lot of my mistakes, early on, were pretty important to me. Those were instrumental to what happened in this process. So I'm not sure that that's an honest answer. I suppose objectively, I mean, like, yeah, I wish I didn't have to go through all of that. But I'm glad that I did. It was a very meaningful experience. My LSAT journey as a whole.
I like that answer. I think you'd be a different person if things went more smoothly for you, because this whole thing took 2 years and some months.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if it was easier for you, I mean, you wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be the same Josh.
Yeah, and I think I came through this better than I started. I like that. So I'm not sure I would. I suppose I could have gone through the same journey with maybe without taking at least one of those first two tests. So I think I could have lost one of those without a significant reduction in value of the journey.
Well, that's a great answer, and it's a great answer to end this AMA on. Just one last thing for everyone here who's in attendance. We're auctioning Josh off to take your LSATs for you. So to the highest bidder, you can start typing into the chat how much you're going to pay to have Josh take your LSAT.
Bid early and bid often. Sold.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. Okay, so Josh is going to be reachable through 7Sage. He's on the forums a lot. You'll still see him a lot. He's going to lead a bunch of. You're going to lead a bunch of stuff. Right?
Yeah. So Monday nights, I'm doing a series of LR workshops. I kind of want to focus on like some of the like real nitpicky specific stuff where we get caught up in a lot of the errors that I know I wrote off as like careless mistakes that turn out not to be careless mistakes at all. They're very specific traps written into the test by the test writers. So every week going to be looking at a different one of those. And then also I think I want to do a similar thing with like for strategy for different strategy exercises and drills. Because I know a lot of it for me was like what even are the exercises that I need to be able to do to address all of these things. So I think I would like to kind of do some of that as well. So I'll definitely want to be, taking everything that I've learned and figured out, on my way up and kind of, leaving all of that behind in as much detail as I can.
Yeah. So you said that's every Monday night?
Yeah.
Great. So those are free for people to join. And are you going to cover RC and LG in other webinars?
So Sage Daniel is going to be doing Thursday night workshops on RC.
Great.
So I think collectively we'll be doing a lot. And then I do want to, like I talked about with logic games, with the procedural foolproofing.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I want to do something with that. I think that's an important element that's missing. So I'll begin that by posting that link and maybe do some kind of webinar on that. I think would be valuable.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone who's here for taking time out of your night to attend. I hope you found this conversation helpful. We're gonna have more of these AMAs with at least 2 other 7Sagers who recently got a Sage promotion. So I hope to see you guys there as well, and I'll see you on the forums. And have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for coming, and I'll see you all around.